The epidemic today has been termed not just diabetes, but diabesity, because of the close association of diabetes and obesity. And lifestyle changes. Lifestyle changes is a term that's used frequently and practiced infrequently, is the first line of therapy for both of these things because, first of all, it's been shown effectively by the diabetes prevention programs to protect patients from progressing from prediabetes to diabetes and also from curtailing cardiovascular complications. So how do we accomplish this? Very simple, twofold approach. You heard Chris talk about nutrition. Decreasing carbohydrates and total calories. Second, activity. Physical activity, increasing whatever you can do physically. You don't have to join a gym. You can walk around the block every day. You can play games. Playing golf is activity. Although a lot of people say that golf is not a good activity, it certainly gives you a lot of walking time, even if you hit the ball as bad as a lot of people do around my house. So the idea of this lifestyle change is, first, the goal is to achieve a nutritional state that's beta cell friendly. Beta cells, what makes insulin. It's only carbohydrates that beat on the beta cells. It's not fat and it's not protein. However, first step then is to lower carbohydrates. The second step is because of insulin resistance due to the fat cells producing hormones, by the way, that cause insulin resistance. You must also control total calories. And the object of this is to lose weight. Now, if these lifestyle changes don't work for a patient, then the backup approach is to add pharmacotherapy. And we have safe and effective drugs today which we are using to treat diabetes. And we are unable to use these drugs to treat prediabetes and prevent the disease because Health and Human Services, the FDA, the federal government, even insurance companies, and even the medical profession does not recognize prediabetes as a disease. And if it's not a disease, nobody pays for it. And if doctors prescribe the drugs to prevent the disease, they are liable if that patient should come down with a complication because they're using the drug, quote, off-label. This is a tremendous problem for us who want to treat this prediabetes to prevent diabetes. And the opportune time is when the patient has a blood sugar between 120 and 125, not when they're over 200. Take this into account. By achieving a weight loss of as little as 15 pounds in a pre-diabetic who is overweight, 15 pounds, 65% of prediabetes can be reversed. By adding one of the many drugs that we have today that have been studied extensively in the treatment of diabetes and prediabetes, another 35% of patients can be prevented from progressing to diabetes. Do the math. That's almost 100%. What we need is we need to be able to treat these patients effectively and early. This is the way to conquer the diabetes epidemic. We know that prediabetes heralds type 2 diabetes in the genetically prone individual. We know how to diagnose this precursor to diabetes and its comorbidities. Simply blood sugar, blood pressure, and blood lipids, and then do something about it. We know how to prevent the disease. So why is there a new case of type 2 diabetes in America every 21 seconds, which amounts to 1,500,000 new cases every year? This is an epidemic that can be prevented. Awareness without action does not provide a solution. We have not taken aggressive action to curb this epidemic. Why is that? One word I want you to remember, if you remember nothing else that I say, that word is inertia. Medical inertia. We know what to do, we are not moving ahead. Incidentally, that same term applies to the treatment of patients with diabetes. I have patients referred to me who've been on 1 or 2 drugs for 5 or 6 years, and the doctor has never increased their medication or changed it, and their blood sugars are constantly above 200. The doctor just keeps writing the same prescription over and over again. Medical inertia. That's the problem, not only with pre-diabetes management, but with diabetes management. And the blame can be shared in 3 ways. First of all, the government, specifically the National Institutes of Health, needs to recognize pre-diabetes as a major threat and needs to do studies, approve studies with drugs that can prevent this disease. And those studies have already been done. But the FDA, Health and Human Services, National Institutes of Health committees have not allowed us to use these drugs. Second, the blame can be passed on to the medical profession. We are not doing enough in order to educate the public. We are not taking enough time to educate parents, school teachers, and people who can recognize this disease. We need to provide more widespread screening, and I believe this should be done at the time of puberty. They should have their first blood tests. You know, if this were an infectious disease epidemic, like malaria or influenza or AIDS, the government would be on target providing vaccines and new drugs to treat these epidemics. They seem to be deaf to the fact that type 2 diabetes, a metabolic disease, is also an epidemic disease. The reason it's not recognized as an epidemic widespread is because people with infectious disease epidemics die on the spot. The influenza pandemic way back in 1917 killed so many people within weeks that it became a real threat and everybody acted. People with type 2 diabetes don't die immediately, but they do die eventually of this epidemic disease, and they die of cardiovascular complications. We need to realize that this is an epidemic akin to those of infectious disease types and provide proper therapy. And finally, the individuals who have type 2 diabetes or who have pre-diabetes need to take personal action themselves to realize that this disease can be reversed. We can prevent type 2 diabetes from occurring simply by a very cheap and very effective change in your lifestyle. Only then will we conquer this epidemic. Now finally, I would like to emphasize the primary cause of type 2 diabetes, which is progressive loss of beta cells. These are the cells in little islands within the pancreas that when you have the gene, which often remains dormant for type 2 diabetes, these cells begin to lose their function and eventually will die when the diabetes occurs. Now, it's important that we recognize that these cells can be preserved by early intervention. By the time you've been diagnosed as having diabetes, about 50% of the beta cells in the pancreas are already dead. We need to intervene early, rejuvenate these cells, and protect those from dying. And on the last page of your handout, I've just listed 6 different classes of drugs which have been proven to be effective in halting the progression of prediabetes to diabetes. One of the problems is that most of these studies have been done for anywhere from 2 weeks to 52 weeks, and when the drugs are withdrawn, the beta cells start to die off again. And a lot of investigators say, well, these drugs are not effective because they have to take them forever. Well, what's wrong with taking them forever if they're going to prevent a disease? If you had high blood pressure and your doctor gave you a blood pressure medication and it lowered your blood pressure, and a few weeks or months down the road you decided to just stop your blood pressure pills, what happens? The blood pressure goes up. So I don't see any problem with, given a safe and effective drug to prevent a disease, to take it until it's shown later on that maybe it loses its efficacy.